June 10, 1944, the Dove River Valley, Normandy. The Great Battle is 4 days old, but for the Allied command, the map looks like a disaster waiting to happen. To the west, Utah Beach. To the east, Omaha. Between them, nothing but a 7-mile gap of flooded swamps and a single narrow highway. At the throat of this gap sits Carentan. General Omar Bradley knows the truth. If the German 6th Parachute Regiment can hold this town, they can split the American army in two and bleed the invasion dry. But to take Carentan, the 101st Airborne has to do the impossible. They have to march single file down a mile-long causeway, exposed, unshielded, and directly into the teeth of the Green Devils. They don't know it yet, but the men of the 502nd are about to step into a meat grinder that history will remember by a much darker name, Purple Heart Lane. Today, we go minute by minute into the brutal struggle for the crossroads of Normandy. Between June 10th and 14th, 1944, the marshy fields surrounding the French town of Carentan became the most important real estate in the world. On one side, the elite 101st Airborne Division, the Screaming Eagles, who had dropped into the darkness of D-Day 4 days prior. On the other, the 6th Fallschirmjäger Regiment, German paratroopers known as the Green Devils. For the Americans, the mission was simple but desperate: consolidation. They had two isolated beachheads, Utah and Omaha. If they couldn't bridge the gap and form a continuous defensive line, they remained vulnerable to a German counterthrust that could split the invasion wide open. But the German defenders had a different plan. The Germans needed to hold Carentan at all costs. Every hour they held the town was an hour for their reinforcements to arrive from the south. Their goal? Block the Americans from merging, hold the line, and prevent the U.S. First Army from cutting off the entire Carentan Peninsula. The stage was set for a brutal showdown. The 101st would have to force their way across a narrow, exposed causeway into the heart of the town. It would be a battle of attrition where ammunition would run dry, bayonets would be fixed, and the arrival of heavy armor, specifically the U.S. 2nd Armored Division, would eventually decide the fate of Normandy. Carentan was defended by 2 battalions of Fallschirmjäger Regiment 6, 6th Parachute Regiment of the 2nd Fallschirmjäger Division. The 17th SS Panzer Grenadier Division, ordered to reinforce Carentan, was delayed by transport shortages and attacks by Allied aircraft. The attacking 101st Airborne Division landed by parachute on June 6th as part of the American airborne landings in Normandy, was ordered to seize control of Carentan. In the ensuing battle, the 101st forced passage across the causeway into Carentan on June 10th and 11th. A lack of ammunition forced the German forces to withdraw on June 12th. The 17th SS Panzer Grenadier Division counterattacked the 101st Airborne on June 13th. Initially successful, its attack was thrown back by Combat Command A of the U.S. 2nd Armored Division.
On the 6th of June 1944, the Allies launched a massive and long-anticipated air and amphibious invasion of Normandy, codenamed Operation Overlord. 2. The 101. St. Airborne Division paratroopers landed behind Utah Beach with the objective of blocking German reinforcements from attacking the flank of the U.S. 7 Corps during its primary mission of seizing the port of Cherbourg. The glider troopers landed by glider and ships on 6 and 7 June. Merging the American beachheads at Utah and Omaha Beach was a D-Day objective of the amphibious forces, but was not achieved because of heavy German resistance at Omaha. Moreover, Allied intelligence believed that 3 German divisions were massing to drive a wedge between them, exercising operational command of both 1st U.S. Army and the 2nd British Army as land forces commander. British General Montgomery gave verbal orders for Lt. General Bradley's forces to make the link-up quickly, Supreme Allied Commander General Dwight D. Eisenhower concurred with Montgomery's order for a concentrated effort to make the link-up. 3. General Eisenhower was not yet in operational command and being kept up to date with the battles from daily phone calls from the 21st Army Group's Chief of Staff. Lieutenant General Omar Bradley, senior American ground commander, ordered the original tactical Plan B change to make the top priority of U.S. operations the joining of the lodgements through Igny and Carentan. The 7th Corps received the Carentan assignment and assigned the 101st Airborne Division, closest to the city, the sole task of capturing Carentan. Carentan is a port city located in Normandy, France, in the Douvre River Valley at the base of the Cotentin Peninsula. At the time of the Second World War, Carentan's civilian population was about 4,000, one for major highways and a railroad converged in the city, from Cherbourg to the northwest, Bayeux and Caen to the east, Saint-Lay to the southeast, and Coutances to the southwest. 5. The city is dominated by high ground to the southwest and southeast, all of which was under German control during the battle. Its other 3 approaches are bordered by watercourses, the Douvre River to the west and north, a boat basin to the northeast, and the Viertate Canal to the east. The Germans flooded much of the Douvre River floodplain prior to the invasion, resulting in a marshland impassable to vehicles and difficult to cross by infantry, a tactic once used by Napoleon Bonaparte at the same location. 6. The highway from Saint-Cloud-du-Mont crossed the floodplain via a narrow 1.5 kilometers 1 mile long causeway having banks rising to 2.5 meters 6 to 9 feet above the marsh. 4 bridges spanned the Douvre and several tributaries along the causeway. Troops in the open under fire could find cover only by digging in on the sloping eastern bank of the causeway. 3. In retreating from Saint-Cloud-du-Mont, the Germans had blown up Bridge No. 2 on the causeway and a portion of the railroad embankment as well. Carentan was defended by 2 battalions of Fallschirmjäger Regiment 6, 6th Parachute Regiment of the 2nd Fallschirmjäger Division, commanded by Oberst Friedrich von der Heydt, and remnants of 91 air landing divisions. Grenadier Regiment 1058. Both had escaped from nearby Saint-Cloud-du-Mont on the 8th of June when the village was captured by the 101st Airborne Division, 2, FJR 6 and 3, FJR 6, 2nd and 3rd Battalions, 6th Parachute Regiment were still intact as fighting formations, but 3, GR 1058 had been nearly destroyed in 3 days of combat and was no longer effective as a unit. The German 84 Corps opening parenthesis 8 for .ko PS reinforced the 6th Parachute Regiment, FJR 6 with survivors of Grenadier Regiment, 914 German 352nd Infantry Division following its the 9th of June defeat at Isigny. Army Group B Commander Field Marshal Erwin Rommel ordered von der Heydt to defend the town to the last man. 6. The 17th SS Panzergrenadier Division stationed at Thouars, ostensibly a mechanized infantry division of the OKW Mobile Reserve, but without tanks or adequate transport, was ordered on the 7th of June to move to Normandy following the Allied landings. However, it was delayed by shortages of trucks and attacks by Allied aircraft that destroyed bridges over the Loire River and interdicted rail movements. Advance elements reached Angers on the 9th of June and Saint-Lay on the 10th of June, by which time Rommel's main concern was in preventing an attack westward from Carentan to cut off the Cotentin. The 38th Panzergrenadier Regiment formed a mobile battle group to resist the 5th Corps units south of Isigny, and the 37th PZG-RGT was sent to Carentan. The 101st Airborne Division consolidated its forces in Normandy on the 9th of June. Its 3 parachute regiments, 501st, 502nd, and 506th Spears had been badly scattered during their airdrops, losing a significant number of men killed and missing as a result, and had suffered further casualties in taking Saint-Cloud-du-Mont. 3. Its 327th Glider Infantry Regiment had landed largely at Uda Beach on D1, the 7th of June, and except for its 3rd Battalion, the attached 1st Battalion, 401st Ger, had yet to engage in serious combat. Several units of the 327 did land by ship on D-Day. The 3 to 7 HQ Co anti-tank platoon glided into France. The 2nd Armored Division, part of the U.S. the 5th Corps, had advanced off Omaha Beach to support the drive of the 175th Infantry Regiment, 29th Division to Isigny. Its combat command a CCA, consisting of M for Sherman tanks of the 2nd Battalion, 66th Armored Regiment and Mechanized Infantry of the 3rd Battalion, 41st Armored Infantry Regiment, was available as an armored force reserve for the 101st Airborne. On the 9th of June, the 101st finished consolidating, with the 502nd PI guarding the right flank along the upper Douve River, the 506th Pier deployed across the Carentan Highway, and the 327th GER on the left in positions along the Douve River opposite Brevins. The 501. St. Pierre was the division's reserve and guarding the left flank east of the 327. Patrols and aerial reconnaissance of Carentan indicated that the town might be lightly defended, and a plan to capture the city by a double envelopment was contrived. Using the 502nd PIR on the right and the 327th GER on the left, scheduled to jump off just after midnight the 10th of June. The 502. ND's mission was to force the bridges and capture high ground southwest of the town along the Pierre's Highway, Hill 30, to block withdrawal. The 327th was to cross the Douve at Brevins, circle a mile to the east, and come in on the road west from Isigny to take the town. Leading the attack of the 502nd, the 3rd Battalion 3rd, 502nd Pier, under LT Call, Robert G. Cole found Bridge No. 2, the Douve Bridge, unrepaired and the engineers assigned to the task pinned down by fire from an 88 mm gun. 1. Cole sent his S2, 1st LT, Ralph B. Gehoff, with a patrol across the river in a small boat. They made their way to the last bridge, which they found blocked by a Belgian gate. The patrol was able to push the obstacle aside only 46 centimeters 18 in. Just enough for one soldier at a time to negotiate. The patrol soon came under flare illumination, mortar, and machine gun fire and eventually returned at 5:30. When the attack was postponed, most of the fire appeared to be coming from a large farmhouse, 49 1844.6 N, 11537.2 W and a hedgerow on higher ground, 230 meters 250 yards to the right of the highway beyond Bridge No. 4. 9 The 3 to 7. THGIR's 1st and 2nd Battalions crossed the Douve River during the early morning hours of the 10th of June. 1st Battalion received friendly fire casualties from U.S. mortar during the crossing by rubber boat. Some units waded across the river. After reaching the east bank in the early daylight hours, the 327th GER swung south towards Katz. 1st Battalion attacked on the south side of the Isigny Highway and 2nd Battalion was on the north side, with Company G in the 2nd Battalion lead. Heavy casualties were received as they approached Carentan. G Company was placed in reserve and was attached to the 3D Battalion of the 327th 401. In the early daylight hours of the 11th, Company of the 401st 3BN and Co-G of the 327th attacked southward along the Bassinay Flot, again taking heavy casualties. At 1:45 1st, 327th GER began crossing the footbridges over the lower Douve, and by 6 o'clock, under cover of artillery fire, the entire regiment was across. It captured Brevins and began the 5-kilometer 3 miles movement south and west. One company of the 401st GER, accompanied by the division assistant G3, left the column and marched east toward Avaux-sur-Levée to link up with the U.S. 29th Infantry Division. The 327th did not encounter serious opposition until it approached the bridges spanning the Viertate Canal east of Carentan at 18 o'clock. It went into the attack with 2 battalions online and by midnight held the east bank. The Douve Bridge was still not repaired when 3rd, 500 to D Pier returned at noon. The paratroopers used engineer materials at hand to improvise a footbridge and began their attack shortly after 13 o'clock. moving single file down the causeway and advancing by crouching and crawling. The point of the 400-man battalion reached Bridge No. 4 at about 16 o'clock, with most of the unit past Bridge No. 3, under artillery and mortar fire, and then sniper and machine gun fire as they got within range. Casualties among the 3rd, 502nd Pier became heavy. Nightfall ended the advance but not the casualties, when an attack at 23:30 by two low-flying German Ru-87 Stukas strafing the causeway killed 30 men and knocked a company completely out of the battle. The severe casualties suffered by the 3rd, 502d Pier, estimated at 67% of the original force, 10 resulted in the nickname Purple Heart Lane applied to that portion of the Carentan-St. Miraglise highway. During the night German fire subsided, Company H crept through the opening in the obstacle, and when it did not suffer any casualties, at 0 for 00 Company G and the headquarters company followed, taking cover on both sides of the highway. Scouts in the point nearly reached the main farmhouse in the morning twilight when they were cut down by German fire. Lt. Col. Cole immediately called for artillery support, but the German fire did not cease. At 6:15, using a smoke screen for concealment, Cole ordered his executive officer, Major John P. Stopka, to pass word to the battalion that it would have to charge the German positions to eliminate them, one using a whistle to signal the attack. Cole led a bayonet charge that overwhelmed the defenders in savage close combat, for which Cole was later awarded the Medal of Honor. At first, only a small portion of the battalion, approximately 20 men, charged, but Stopka quickly followed with 50 more. The attack picked up impetus as the other paratroopers observed it in progress and joined it, crossing a ditch, overrunning the empty farmhouse. Men of Company H found many German paratroopers dug in along the hedgerow behind it. Companies H and G killed them with hand grenades and bayonets, but at severe cost to themselves. The survivors of 3rd, 502nd PI set up defensive positions and requested 1st Battalion 502nd PI continue the attack. Lt. Col. Patrick F. Cassidy's battalion, however, also took serious casualties from mortar fire and could only strengthen Lt. Col. Cole's defensive line, taking up positions from the 3rd Battalion command post in the farmhouse to the highway. During a 2-hour truce at midday, which U.S. forces attempted to negotiate for removal of casualties, Company C 502nd moved forward from Bridge No. 4 into a cabbage patch between the 2nd and 3rd hedgerows. Company of 502nd moved up just behind Company C and extended its line across the highway. Fighting at the cabbage patch during the afternoon often took place at extremely close range with the contending forces on opposite sides of the same hedgerow, except for the noon truce, which FJR-6 also used to resupply and reorganize. The American forces repelled repeated attacks. The final one nearly succeeded in overwhelming the 3rd, 502nd Pier at 18:30, gaining all but the final hedgerow between it and the Douve River. However, Lt. Col. Cole's artillery officer, able to overcome jamming of his radio, called down a concentration of the 7th Corps' artillery so close that several Americans were also killed. The overwhelming violence of the 5-minute barrage rolled back the last German counterattack. Patrols from the 327th had discovered a partially destroyed footbridge over the Vierta Canal at the point where it connected with the Douve, northeast of the city. 12th, the bridge was repaired by 10 o'clock, and a company each of the 2nd, Company G, and 3rd Battalions, Company A for 01, crossed and attacked down the forested banks of the boat Bassin A Flot, but like the 502nd, were stopped 800 meters (0.5 miles) short of Carentan by machine gun and mortar fires that artillery could not suppress. FJR-6, nearly out of ammunition, withdrew during the night, leaving only a small rear guard. A Luftwaffe parachute resupply drop that night 11 kilometers, 7 miles to the southwest arrived too late to help. For the 17th THSS Panzer Grenadier Division Generalmajor der Waffen SS Werner Ostendorf, on the road toward Carentan since D-Day, had been delayed by air attack and lack of fuel. By nightfall on the 11th of June, only a few advanced elements had reached the division's assembly areas. To complete the capture of Carentan, Gen. Courtney Hodges of 1st Army created a task force under Gen. Anthony McAuliffe to coordinate the final assault. The mission to take Hill 30 was reassigned to the 506th Spear. The attack along the Bassin et Flotte was renewed, and the 501st Spear was relieved of its defensive positions to circle behind the 327th Ger and approach Hill 30 from the east. 12. The movements were covered by an all-night artillery bombardment of Carentan using naval gunfire, Corps artillery for .2-inch mortar, and tank destroyers that had joined the 327th Ger along the eastern canal. 13 battalions of the 506th moved down the Carentan causeway after dark, passed through the 2nd, 502nd Pier at 2 o'clock on the 12th of June, and marched cross-country to Hill 30, the village of La Billonnerie, which they captured by 5 o'clock. 12. The 1st Battalion took up defensive positions facing south across the highway, while the 2nd Battalion was ordered north to attack the city. The 501st Pier during the night moved into position behind the 327th Glider Infantry, crossed the canal, and reached Hill 30 by 6:30. At 6 o'clock, Carentan was attacked from the north by 1st, 401st Ger, and the south by 2nd, 506th Spear. Both units encountered machine gun fire from the rear guard, but the 2nd, 506th, was also sporadically shelled by artillery to the south of Carentan. Despite this, both units swiftly cleaned out the rear guard in a short fight near the railway station and advanced on the streets, ending with the enemy's forces. Then the U.S. paratroopers met at 7:30 in the center of town after brief combat. The 1st, 506th Spear engaged in more serious combat south of town when it had to rescue Call Sink's command post, surrounded because it had pushed too far towards the German lines in the dark. 3. In the afternoon, both the 506th and 501st advanced southwest, but after a mile were stopped by heavy contacts with new German units, including a few tanks. 12. The 17th THSS Panzer Grenadier Division had intended to counterattack to retake Carentan, but its assault guns were held up in the assembly areas by Allied air attacks. Instead, infantry units dug in on higher ground below the city and battled the paratroopers until dark. At dawn on the 13th of June, the 101st Airborne was about to attack the German line when it was attacked by tanks and assault guns. 2 battalions of the 37th SS Panzer Grenadier Regiment, supported by the 17th SS Panzer Battalion and III FJR 14 struck hard at the 501st PI on the American left, which fell back under heavy pressure. 12. The left flank companies Dog and Fox companies of the 506th then gave way, and by noon the spearheads of the German attack were within 450 meters, 500 yards of Carentan. However, Company Easy of the 506th, commanded by 1st LT Richard D. Winners, anchored its right flank against a railroad embankment and held its position, reinforced by the 2nd, 502nd Pier taking position on its right. Easy Company slowed the German attack until American tanks could be brought up, reacting to an ultra warning of the size and threat of the counterattack. 8. Lieutenant General Bradley diverted CCA as 2nd Armored Division, commanded by Brig. Gen. Maurice Rose and near Isigny-sur-Mer to Carentan at 10:30. At 14 o'clock CCA attacked, supported by the self-propelled howitzers of the 14th Armored Field Artillery Battalion. One task force of tanks and mechanized infantry surged down the road to Bopt in the 2nd, 506th area and shattered the main German thrust. A second task force drove back German forces along the Piriers Highway, inflicting heavy losses in men and equipment. 15 CCA, followed by the 502nd Pier, then pushed west a mile beyond the original lines. The counterattack became known anecdotally among the surviving paratroopers as the Battle of Bloody Gulch.